Welcome to another enlightening episode of the Mentorship Champion podcast, where we delve deep into the world of mentorship and the profound impact it has on students and universities in driving student success outcomes. Our guest today is Maria Cuzzo, a passionate believer in the power of mentorship and the current provost and vice president of academic affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Superior. Dr. Cuzzo brings a unique perspective on the importance of establishing and nurturing healthy peer relationships and mentorship programs at universities. Maria's personal commitment to mentorship is rooted in her own transformative experience. It drives her dedication to supporting and celebrating mentors who play pivotal roles in guiding students toward success. In this episode, we will explore Maria's insights on the impact of mentorship in peer relationships on driving student success outcomes, her vision for creating accessible mentorship opportunities for all students, and the importance of intentionality, reflection, and support and mentorship endeavors. Get ready for a compelling conversation filled with wisdom, reflections, and actionable insights as we uncover the champion in mentorship, Maria Cuzzo. I like to kick all of our mentorship champion conversations with the first question, right? Like, what does mentorship mean to you?
You know, Alex, I've thought about this since I saw the question. And the formal definition I like to give to people is mentorship is a mutually beneficial relationship of trust and care between a mentor and a mentee that is designed to grow both parties. And so when I think about the mentor part of it, with a good mentor, they are offering their knowledge, skills, abilities, and experience, and I always hope wisdom too, to help share key insights, observations, supports, and advice if requested by their mentee. So the mentor brings all of that richness to the relationship. Now, the mentee, on the other hand, is the one seeking knowledge, skills, experience, advice of the mentor to achieve their own life goals. So what makes this so mutual is the mentor has to understand that it's the life goals or success goals of the student that needs to be at the center of that relationship. And the student or other mentee needs to understand that they are seeking out a mentor for particular reasons that have to do with the specialness of that particular person. So that's where the beauty of mutuality comes in. And the final thing I would say about, what does mentorship mean to me is, in my experiences with mentorship, which are many, many over the years, I always hope both parties are committed to having a real open-minded growth experience that at its best is transformative for both of them, but for sure the mentee. And at its minimum is still a passage of knowledge, wisdom, and advice that can hopefully benefit the mentee.
No, there's a couple of things that really struck or really sticking out to me. And I appreciate you kicking off your response to this question, highlighting that it's designed to grow both parties. And so I think oftentimes, traditionally, when we think of the mentoring relationship, we're always traditionally looking at it through the lens of how does this benefit the mentee? But I think the key to success is understanding that there has to be some reciprocation, and there's a humbling that happens when you're the mentor and recognizing that there is something that I can learn from my mentee, whatever that is. And so that I hope folks are taking note of that piece of it. And you said the beauty of mutuality, which I think is the perfect kind of phrase to describe it, is that mutual beneficial relationship. And I think the second piece of this is that at a maximum, the hope is that it's a transformative experience for both parties. And then at the minimum, the bare minimum, which what you just said, is a sharing of knowledge, is a sharing of insights. But I think that challenges us all, right? Folks who are listening, even myself, to say, okay, how do I move away from the bare minimum and ensure that I'm entering into this mentoring relationship with the intentionality that we're reaching for transformation, right? And I think that's where the real work happens. That's when the beauty happens. That's when we move into a place, where, especially for students, where we're saying this relationship is meant to expand access, it's meant to raise awareness, it's meant to connect you to resources that you may not have had otherwise, right? I think there is a beauty in saying, how do I ensure that this is transformative?
Yeah, there's all the items you mentioned are necessary and valuable transactional parts
Mm-hmm.
of a mentor relationship. But it is the spirit within which those transactions
Yeah.
occur that is so important from my experience. And even while doing transactional help with the mentee, I always committed to being interested in the whys and the whats
Mm-hmm.
and really understanding who this person is and
Mm-hmm.
inviting them to ask me the same kind of inquiry. Because, there's no better way to get to transformation than exchanging one's story and hearing it through one's own ears in the presence of a trusted other.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I believe there are a lot of transactional elements, most of which I put in the category of minimum expected. I mean, any good mentor worth their salt is going to be doing that kind of work. But the great mentors that exist, and the great mentees, by the way, are the ones that are looking for that elevating experience. And that's more about relationship, and that requires its own set of skills.
One, there's just so many nuggets. This spirit within which you do the transactional, I mean, that in and of itself is powerful. Like thinking about the why, the purpose, part of what you're saying, at least what I'm hearing, is that support can go beyond the minimum of sharing just the transactional things. Like support it extends beyond that, and there's a level of vulnerability and psychological safety, right, that has to happen in this relationship, and it can be reciprocated. And in order to create that, the mentee is also able to kind of stand in their power, and ask you the same questions. I think that's really important, which is actually a good segue to my next question. What advice would you give to someone seeking a mentor or wanting to make the most out of their mentorship kind of relationship? And that could be, again, through the lens of the mentee or through the lens of the mentor, because what I think you've done is you've challenged folks who are mentors to be a bit more thoughtful and intentional how they navigate these relationships to ensure success.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, and I think it's two parts. So I'm going to talk to each of them separately. The first part is the advice you give to someone seeking a mentor. In the higher ed environment, this is often the student or a new employee to an organization. And in any organization, it's generally somebody that is fairly new to the organization or seeking a new experience in a different way, right? So I think the first thing that the mentee has to really be aware of to the best of their ability is why they want a mentor. The why is important here because that will in some ways determine the rules of the game between the mentee and the mentor. By the same token, a mentor needs to know the why so that in the broad menu of knowledge, skills, abilities, and experience that they can offer, they can then situate the things that will be the most relevant to the mentee. So that's number one. The mentee has to know why they want or need a mentor. The second thing is, I think, is the mentee needs to think about the type of relationship they would like. So I have experienced all kinds in my career. Sometimes, and I'll just refer to students as an example, sometimes students are coming to me and all they want is transactional help. They're not interested in a deeper or more
Yeah.
elevating experience. That's what they want. That's what they need. So in that instance, generally, I, of course, offer the transactional help to the best of my ability, but I always keep the door open to them. That if they'd like to talk more, if they'd like to share their life story, if we should, talk about opportunities that might be available to them, I always leave the door for them to ask for something more. Some mentees come to me and they really are looking to form a relationship with somebody that can help them move forward on their either academic advanced education path or into the job market. And now that requires an exchange of knowledge at a different level. And so it's important the mentor and mentee in the beginning understand what that would involve. Career preparation, advanced education preparation is not merely transactional. There's a whole set of socialization and all kinds of other things that should be exchanged. Some mentees come to me and they just want to have a powerful experience with somebody that they respect and that they're inspired by, and they want to learn how it is that I, as a mentor, do that. Now, that is more the life story, the narrative, the connection. And once in a while, a mentee comes and they want the whole shebang. So I think as a mentee, you have to get some clarity about what you're looking for, realizing that as the relationship naturally and organically evolves, you might look for more. Now, the second part of the equation was wanting to make the most of a mentorship. Now, this, I think, applies to both parties. So we've already talked a little bit about the mentee end of it, and those are factors that I would say apply. I would add to the mentee side that the mentee has to have some insight, I think, into how transparent and open they're willing to be. And to me, as a mentor, the mentee controls that. There's no pressure that should ever be put on that particular aspect. But a relationship is a big commitment. Relationships take time and energy. You have to work through things with each other. You're going to encounter difficulties. So sometimes for younger students in particular, they just never had the opportunity to form a relationship that wasn't family or wasn't romantic with somebody else for a different purpose. So I think the mentee has got to be at least open-minded and willing to consider that this could be a meaningful relationship different than any other kind they've had. Now, for the mentor, I think the mentor has got to do a searing self-examination about how much time and energy they're willing to put into the mentorship relationship. Because mentors that just cram it all in and, you catch as catch can, and at most they've got 20 minutes at a window. This is not a good mentorship setup. So the mentor has to have pre-decided how important mentorship is. And for me, it was always, behind high quality teaching and learning, mentorship was number 2.
Yeah.
And I had lots of roles to practice it. I was a mock trial coach for 26 years. I was an advisor to students. That's a formal transactional role, but I made it more. I certainly was a senior faculty member that talked about futures and possibilities.
Yeah.
So the mentor has to be clear about their level of commitment. There's nothing worse in the world than for a mentee to take the risk to try to have a meaningful mentorship relationship only to discover that their mentor will not and does not make time for them. So I think those are some of the factors of the advice that I would give.
First of all, great advice. I'm sitting here writing every single thing down because I'm like, you need to take this yourself. I think there are a couple of things that I want to touch on. I think, one, I want to affirm and just reiterate that it is okay to have a transactional mentoring relationship, right? Like that folks are sometimes often just looking for a transactional help. That doesn't necessarily include, as you said, the narrative, the sharing of experiences. It is, I am looking for someone to take me from X to Y. I'm looking for someone to provide X, Y, and Z, right? And so I am also connecting that to what you just said of, as a mentor, it is your responsibility to have a menu of options and the way in which you're looking to show up in a mentoring relationship. And so then presenting that so that then the mentee can say, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z if you're willing to, make that happen. So I think the second piece of this that I think it's really important, and it's connected to the evolution of mentorship, and it's making me think about it from the cultural kind of perspective, but then like also specifically like higher ed. Now mentorship is seen as a high impact practice. It's something that's just now I think adopted in terms of formalizing it. But one of the things that I think is really important is the soft skills around being a mentor and a mentee. And what you said is like before, like we were just learning these relationships, right? Like there was no intentional training of saying, here's how to be a good mentor. I would love for you to just touch on that briefly around just the evolution of mentorship and the value of, I think, the soft skills like that are required for these type of relationships to be successful.
Mhm.
I know I like am asking a question that I didn't have on my list, but like it kind
That's
of just
okay.
made me think about
This is
those
one of our
things.
side trails, right?
Yes.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Here's my lived experience on the evolution of mentorship. So I've been in higher ed either as a student or as a faculty member first and now an administrator for going on over 36 years when I think of my full range of experience. When I was in college as a student, I identified certain instructors, faculty mostly, in my academic programs. Then it was political science and religious studies and philosophy. There were a combination of things who simply inspired me. They were a large part of the reason why I chose some of those majors and minors was because of their inspirational presence and the way that they conveyed information and the way that they knew what they were talking about, and frankly, their humanity. There are a lot of high quality instructors or faculty that are excellent as disciplinary experts, but their humanity doesn't come through, So for me, I was always looking for that because to form a relationship like that was a scary thing for me. I came from a very rural area in central Minnesota. I hadn't had a lot of help with mentorship growing up. I regard my folks still as my primary early mentors in life, and I honor them to this day for the job that they did. But when it came to academic settings and trying to figure out a university and having been far from home for the first time in my life, I was very scared and I was distrusting. So that was what it was like as a student. Now I got lucky because I connected with a couple of those faculty members and staff members at the university that I found inspiring, and they took me under their wing. They did it in different ways. So like my political science professor, Dr. Peter Schotten, as an example, he approached everything analytically and through the discipline, but he was a very caring individual. So we backdoored it into the kind of relationship that I now intentionally seek to develop. Mrs. Husebo was in student affairs and she was all about the student. So that was like, high duty relationship oriented. So through luck, more than anything in college, I had a range of mentorship opportunities and they all changed my life. I look back to those people and what they did and what they taught me and what they drew out of me and asked me to stretch to, and they absolutely changed my life. So then we fast forward to law school. Now, law school is a highly competitive environment. Today, it's getting much more touchy-feely, which I think is a wonderful thing, frankly. But in my day, you opened law school with look to your left, look to your right. In 6 months, one of you won't be there. I mean, that was the opening. And and I went to a top flight law school, so of course I got what I asked for. But finding a mentor in law school was very, very difficult. But there was a third year student, I was a first year, who took an interest in me and gave me a lot of valuable critical advice about how, as a student, to survive law school. And that was my first peer-to-peer. mentor relationship.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also found a couple of additional professors, none of which formed deep relationships in the way I talk about that, but they were transactional mentors and they were very good at what they did in that regard. So there I met the transactional mentor and I could see the value of that. Now you fast forward to a PhD program.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was blessed. I loved my PhD, by the way. I know that's a sick statement to most people, but I absolutely loved those years of learning and just growing. I just grew so fast. But I met several faculty members there who were in the PhD program who absolutely took me under their wing and helped polish me, helped me get, ready for an academic setting in all respects. And they cared about me. So then I get into being a faculty member in a college setting, and I was bound and determined that I was going to find the crucial mix of all those experiences that I had had as one-offs to figure out how to really do a bang-up job for a mentee. All along the way, I will tell you, there was no formal training. Nobody ever sat me down and said, hey, this is what mentorship is. Never had that conversation. Never heard about it in any of my intellectual preparation programs, law school, whatever. Law school should have been talking about how to form a client relationship. PhD should have been talking about how to do student success. Zippo on it when I went through the programs. So I think we've come a long way with our attempts to really raise up mentorship and knowing there's a skill set to it.
What I'm taking away from what you just shared is how you had these individual experiences and then they shaped how you now view or even just like engage in mentorship. There's the piece of the peer-to-peer, there's the transactional, there's the transformative, there's the faculty aspect, right? Like there's the piece of it, the inspiration, right? Of inspirational type of kind of relationships. So mentoring relationships can look like many different things, and there's room, and the beauty is having multiple type of these relationships that are always connected to your why, and each relationship has a different why.
Yes. Well, I can tell you in the early days of my mentorship experience, there was absolutely no language of soft skills. Nobody ever talked about things like that. And it was sort of this unwritten understanding that, well, some people are good at people and some people aren't. That was kind of the viewpoint. I can recall when I practiced law, that was my first career out of law school, that soft skills just popped right into the radar very quickly because I was managing client relationships. And what I found is that if I were simply a transactional attorney with a client, they still walked away dissatisfied because they felt like they may have gotten a technical answer to their question about the law, but they didn't feel heard and they didn't feel like they were part of a dynamic, right? And so I had to learn those the hard way. Now, I had some of those already in place, obviously. I mean, we all do to some extent or another, but I had to really intentionally think about how I would portray myself or interact with my clients in an effective way. I was the first and only woman lawyer in Douglas County, Wisconsin, only the second in the northwest corner of the state of Wisconsin. And I was 24 years old. So I just put all those things in place, right?
So many dynamics in and of that, like that in and of itself is like,
it's a fabulous story.
yeah.
But when I began taking on clients, many of them came to me in the beginning out of family law. They just assumed that because I was a woman and a lawyer that I would do family law. Now, I had zero interest in doing family law, but that was an area to grow an early practice entry, and my firm wanted me to do it, so I did it. And what I quickly learned after about the first 3 months of bringing in new clients was many of them, not all, but many of them came in with one of two assumptions about me, not me, they didn't know me at all, but the woman lawyer assumption. One is that I would be mother, that was my role. Now that requires high soft skills to pull off being mother when an attorney, but that was the articulated phrase and the need. is that I would handhold people through some of the most horrible experiences of their life with relationship, and that I would be mother. I wasn't even a mother at that point yet in my life. I mean, that was a big thing to handle. The other assumption was far worse, and that is that I would be bitch on a leash. One of my clients actually used that phrase, right? And I couldn't be that. That's not who I am. And
Yes.
how do you use soft skills to correct misassumptions?
Ooh.
And I think that one of the key parts of mentorship, as I've learned over the years, is that everybody comes into these relationships with assumptions of one kind or another. And you have to call upon your toolkit of soft skills to figure out how to have not only the great dialogue, the visionary dialogue, the effective transactional dialogue, but also the hard dialogue of two people working with each other over time in a pretty intensive way. So I always go back to that early experience as a young attorney where nobody had taught soft skills, but it became very apparent to me that that was going to be a critical skill I needed to develop fast. And fast forward that picture frame, those kinds of assumptions or difficulties, or a good mentor challenges their mentee on occasion. And some mentees want no part of thinking different, changing, opening up their mind to other things. These are the hard parts of mentorship. And that all requires very effective soft skills. And so I am very gratified today that there are actually mentorship training programs. At my home university, I actually headed up our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, and I brought mentorship training to our university about a decade and a half ago. And, that was thrilling to discover that there was actual materials that could help a mentor think about their role in mentorship.
I mean, Maria, you're just dropping so many nuggets of wisdom. I'm still trying to think through how do you use soft skills to combat misassumptions. I'm like, that can be a whole, dissertation
Yeah.
on that piece, because I mean, I think we all kind of deal with and having to navigate misassumptions, and to connect that to the soft skills is, I think, really vital and important. But also, I think the second piece of this, of understanding that mentoring relationships is a relationship. And so there are going to be kind of hard conversations, even amongst peers, right? And so how do we help folks navigate difficult conversations? And I know I'm always connecting it back to Mentor Collective, one, because I'm such a fan of what we do, but it makes me think about the resources that we provide students. And one of those is navigating difficult conversations. Another one is the goal setting, because I think it's so important that you are providing the training, the language, the toolkits, whatever it is, for all of the things that show up in these types of relationships, and relationships in general, right? When you were talking about the value of client relationships, and you said that it couldn't be just transactional. Like, if it was transactional, folks still left feeling disappointed because they wanted to feel heard, right? And valued. And I think that is key to any type of relationship, is feeling heard, is feeling seen, is feeling valued.
One thing I've noticed about that, and I appreciate that point very much, is good mentors today need to recognize they are living in a nested bowl of context.
Yes.
And part of that is there are bigger goals that are part of ensuring things like student success, belonging, and belonging applies across any organization.
Yeah.
And that any mentor has to learn that overarching set of objectives or goals that are very important to retention or recruitment into any organization, or recruiting students, for example. So for me, that was a huge shift at somewhere along my career, from thinking of mentorship as my realm alone with a student, to thinking about me as a member of my organization, trying to help build a culture of belonging and access, and then linking back to me and how my actions could contribute to that for the good of students. And that's a massive shift, which some people just don't make. But the best mentors are the ones who get that. They're part of something bigger than just their appointment book.
And I do want to take this back to mentorship specifically in with your experience and how it's shown up in your life. I know you've touched on this a little bit, but I would love to dig deeper into it. Is how has the power of mentorship shown up in your life?
When I thought that, I love this question, by the way, because you don't get many launches like that where you're supposed to sit down and really reflect.
Yeah.
I go all the way, well, I go back to my family environment because I thought my parents were spectacular at being mentors to me as a young person growing up. They set expectations, they created safe conditions, they affirmed my value and my talent. They were there for me in really hard times. They created a sense of belonging within our family unit. That's often the very first experience that people have, or sometimes sadly do not have in their early years. I had that. Going into the school environment, on the other hand, was horrifying. I was one of those young kids. I was shy as all get out and very introverted. I wouldn't open my mouth for anything. It's ironic that, obviously I got into a high profile extroverted position, but I'm still an introvert in my heart. I was afraid of not being good enough. I was afraid of fitting in. There were a lot of rural town dynamics. I mean, nothing as important as what I would view as racism, but very, complicated. Mercilessly bullied for probably 6 years of my growing up years. Again, that was pre-bullying movement. I mean, nobody knew what to do about that stuff. So the first mentor that ever showed up, getting long story short, first mentor that ever showed up was my forensic coaches in 7th grade. I was doing a competition, Miss FHA. I mean, that just cracks me up now. Future Homemaker of America. It's not the direction I ended up taking in life, obviously, but and I had no talent. I thought I had no talent, so I chose to recite poetry, some of it my own, and some of it poetry that had just been in my family growing up. And sure enough, I won. But one of the coaches that judged this event was the debate coach for junior high, John Chelstrom. I'll never forget him. And he came up to me after and he said, "You got a skill, you got a talent. I want you to go out for debate." I have no idea what he was talking about. Sounded really scary to me, but I did. And that pathway for 5 years of my life, at being coached, having mentors, and participating in an activity that terrified me, wound up me being 4th place in a national competition in my senior year and winning everything in sight in the state of Minnesota. They changed my life because they invested in me. They saw something in me I didn't see. They brought it out. They encouraged me. They led me through the hard times. I mean, I will owe those 2 men for the rest of my life in high school. You get to college, you run into somebody, as I mentioned before, Dr. Peter Schotten, great political scientist. I did an intensive research project under his mentorship. We learned a lot about each other in that project. He's the one that helped me get to law school, changed my life. I get to law school. I run into other faculty members there who again brought out skills and encouraged certain things in me that I didn't think I could do in a law school setting. Changed my life. You go forward into my legal career. I ran into elder mentors, all men, because of course I was the only woman, but they were wonderful. And they helped me experience and experiment with the field of law. They also supported me when it became clear to me I didn't want to spend the rest of my life doing that. Changed my life. Going to a PhD program, there's at least 3 faculty members in my PhD program that absolutely convinced me I was good enough to earn a PhD. I didn't think I was. Changed my life. I get into teaching. I have mentors here. They are now mostly retired, but they were people that I couldn't have lived without as I tried to become a tenure track faculty member. Changed my life. So the story of that theme for me is mentorship from day one has shown up as a powerful transformative experience across time in multiple settings for different reasons. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.
I mean, that's a tagline right there. Because I think there is value in reflecting on how these type of relationships are so critical and key to how we see ourselves, to how we navigate spaces, to how it's supported the journey and the multiple journeys that we all experience as human beings. And it, for me, is often a reminder that these type of relationships are core to our humanity in the same way that familial relationships are, in the same way that romantic relationships are, that this is core to the human experience. And because of that, there's just like a deep value and I don't know if it's reverence in the same way that we reverence other types of relationships that should be applied to mentorship. Because I think most of the times we think it's a nice to have, but when we reflect on it, we were like, these were critical.
Mhm.
And so, how do we ensure that we are providing the structure and the frameworks so that everyone gets that same benefit of these transformative relationships in the same way that we would like folks to have beautiful friendships, in the same way that we would like to have, great relationships with our colleagues, right? Like mentorship deserves that same type of investment. And so that's why I always ask the question, what makes you want to champion mentorship? And oftentimes I think that is because of how it's shown up in our life. So
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, because I've had those kinds of transformative experiences with mentors who I know changed my life. And I believe that that can happen for a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, there were a couple of mentors along the way that were very problematic to me, but the vast majority just were amazing people giving their best and caring about me. So that's number one, my own lived experiences. The second reason I want to champion mentorship is in my current role as provost, I have some opportunities to select and support certain programs. To me, a healthy peer mentorship program, such as what Mentor Collective delivers, is very key because it starts often peer to peer. That's the easiest access point for many people because that's talking to someone that is closer to your particular place in life. So I think, but I also think good peer-to-peer programs require structure and training and having diagnostics like Mentor Collective provides. So I want to be sure that there's a healthy peer-to-peer type mentor program at my university because that's one facet of mentorship. But more than that, I want to make sure that the mentors on the campus are given the kinds of support they need to be able to fully intentionally, reflectively engage in this activity of mentorship and be celebrated for the work that they do. So just last week, I was at a campus-wide celebration of undergraduate research, and every project of 32 students had a mentor or two. And we were all gathered together celebrating, and I couldn't help but look across that group of mentors, and I know what they put into that kind of work. And just think, wow, what can we do to support and encourage these people in the work that they do? Not only students for their great work, but our mentors. So I'm committed to trying to figure out how to do that better. I also think that, in my life experience and what I hear from students who still keep in touch with me after 30 years, is that students don't remember what happened in a given class. What they remember is the impact that a special person had on them.
yes.
In a given experience, whether it's a class, out of class, I don't care. They remember that. They remember how it made them feel. They remember the sense of how they grew. They associate that with a good time in their life where they began to grow into themselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
therefore, I think a mentorship opportunity of one type or another needs to be available to every student.
Yeah. Mic drop. That is a mic drop moment. Yeah, I think that I haven't even thought about that aspect of it, but it just again elevates for me personally the value of these types of relationships. And I think this conversation, anytime I do these, Maria, I am just in awe. I'm on the brink of tears because it there is value of relationships. And one of the things like I want to make sure that we all have examples of just like healthy relationships, transformative relationships. And I think that you said it and you hit it on the nail that peer mentoring relationships is like easy access for those things to happen. Of course, there's also room for them to be unhealthy. They like there's room for it to not feel psychologically safe, right? And I think that's a part of just relationships in general. But if we provide the resources, if we provide the training, if we provide the intentionality, if we provide the space for it, I'm like, how transformative can these experiences be in students and young folks' lives? And so, how do we really do ensure that we're creating access for all students to experience this at such critical moments in their life? Because around that traditional age of college, 18 to 22, I think about my own experience and how transformative that was for my own individual growth journey. And so this was such a beautiful conversation. I literally took 4 pages of notes and they're all full for my own self.
Thank you for that.